Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is going to focus on Janie's childhood, going from when she's a little girl to when she's 16 years of age. So in Chapter 2, I want for you to consider, what is it that we learn about Janie's childhood? All right, let's begin. Janie saw her life like a great tree in leaf with things suffered, things enjoyed, things done, and things undone. Dawn and doom was in the branches. I know exactly what I got to tell you, but it's hard to know where to start at. Now remember, this is Janie talking to her friend Phoebe. She's going to begin to tell her the story of her life to explain where she's been. I ain't never seen Ma, Papa, and I didn't know if I did. My mama neither. She was gone from around here long before I was big enough to know. My grandma raised me, my grandma and the white folks she worked with. She had a house out in the backyard, and that was where I was born. They was quality white folk up there in the West Florida, named Washburn. She had 4 grandchildren on the place, and all of us played together, and that's how come I never called my grandma nothing but Nanny, 'cause that's where everybody on the place called her. Nanny used to catch us in our devilment and lick every youngin' on the place, and Miss Washburn did the same. I reckon they never hit us a lick amiss, because them 3 boys and us 2 girls was pretty aggravatin', I 'spect. I was with them white children so much till I didn't know I wasn't white till I was around 6 years old. Wouldn't have found it out then, but man come along taking pictures, and without asking anybody, Shelby, that was the oldest boy, he took him to take us. Around a week later, the man brought a picture for Miss Washburn to see, and pay him what she did. They all give us a good licking. So really quickly, licking means beaten. If you're not sure what that means, it means that they kind of got smacked for what they did. So in this page, we see another symbol developing where the tree is going to symbolize Janie's life. And so we see that set up at the very beginning of this chapter in the very first sentences. And so in Janie's childhood, we learn that she didn't know her mom or her father, and that she was raised by her grandmother, who goes by Nanny, or who she calls Nanny. And her nanny, or her grandma, was a servant for a white family, the Washburn family. And so Janie grew up with the 4 white children in the house, and they all played together. Nanny took care of all 5 of them, and Miss Washburn took care of all 5 of them, to such a degree that Janie didn't realize that she wasn't white until she saw this picture. So this man comes around. The oldest boy, Shelby, asks the man to take a picture, tells them that they'll pay for it, and when the man comes back with the picture, Miss Washburn has to pay for the picture, and she's upset about it. So that's everything that's happening there. But that's the first time that Janie sees the picture of herself and sees what she actually looks like. And so let's see what happens next. So this is Janie speaking still. So when we looked at the picture and everybody got pointed out, there wasn't nobody left except a real dark little girl with long hair standing by Eleanor. That's where I was supposed to be, but I couldn't recognize that child as me. So I asked, "Where is me? I don't see me." Everybody laughed, even Miss Washburn. Miss Nellie, the mama of the chillun who come back home after her husband dead, she pointed to the dark one and said, "That's you, Alphabet. Don't you know your own self?" They used to call me Alphabet because so many people had done name me different things. I looked at the picture a long time and seen it was my dress and my hair, so I said, "Ah, I'm colored." Then they all laughed real hard, but before I seen the picture, I thought I was just like the rest. Us lived there, having fun till the chillins at school got to teasing me about living in the white folks' backyard. There was a naughty-head gal named Marilla that used to get me mad every time she looked at me. Miss Washburn used to dress me up in all the clothes her grandchildren didn't need no more, which still was better than what the rest of the colored children had. And she used to put hair ribbons on my head for me to wear. That used to rile Marilla up a lot, and she would pick at me all the time and put some others up to do the same. They'd push me away from the ring plays, and make out they couldn't play with nobody that lived on premises. Then they'd tell me not to be talking on over my looks, because they mama told them about a hound dog hunting my papa all night long. About Mr. Washburn and the sheriff putting the bloodhound on the trail to catch my papa for what he'd done to my mama. They didn't tell about how he was trying to get in touch with my mama later on so he could marry her. Nah, they didn't talk about that part at all. They made it sound real bad so as to crumple my feathers. None of them didn't even remember what his name was, but they all knew about the bloodhound part by heart. Nanny didn't love to see me with my head hung down, so she figured it would be more better for me if us had a house. She got the land and everything, and then Miss Washburn helped us a whole heap with things. So, what do we learn about Janie's childhood? What have we learned so far? So, we've learned that Nanny, Janie's grandmother, has protected her from the harsh effects of racism and poverty. So this is occurring in the early 1900s, where racism is still rampant and there is extreme inequality and there's a lot of poverty in the South. And so Nanny has done everything that she can to protect Janie from those two things. And Janie's grown up with a lot of confidence, where she's never seen herself different from anyone around her, and that she's never felt as though she is lesser than. However, this changes when Janie goes to school. So when she gets to grade school, the children are jealous of her hair, her clothes, where she lives. And so they are mean to her and they tell her things about her past that she didn't know. So for instance, it's implied in the story that they tell Janie in school that Janie's born from rape, where her father raped her mother, and that Janie's father had to run from the law. And that's what they're talking about with the hounds chasing her father. And so, because the children are being so viciously mean to Janie, Janie's grandmother, Nanny, decides to move out of the Washburns' kind of land, out of the house behind their house, and move them to their own home off that premises, in hopes that it'll stop the children from bullying Janie for where she lives and where she comes from. All right, so let's pick back up on the reading. Phoebe's hungry listening helped Janie to tell her story. So she went on thinking back to her young years and explaining them to her friend in soft, easy phrases, while all around the house the night time put on flesh and blackness. She thought a while and decided that her conscious life had commenced at Nanny's gate. On a late afternoon, Nanny had called her to come inside the house because she had spied Janie letting Johnny Taylor kiss her over the gatepost. It was spring afternoon in West Florida, so this is back into the flashback. It was spring afternoon in West Florida. Janie had spent most of the day under a blossoming pear tree in the backyard. She had been spending every minute that she could steal from her chores under that tree for the last 3 days. That was to say, ever since the first tiny bloom had opened. It had called to her to come and gaze on a mystery. From barren brown stems to glistening leaf buds, from leaf buds to snowy virginity of bloom. It stirred her tremendously. How? Why? It was like a flute song forgotten in another existence and remembered again. What? How? Why? The singing she heard that she had nothing to do with her ears. The rose of the world was breathing out smell. It followed her through all her waking moments and caressed her in her sleep. It connected itself with other vaguely felt matters that had stuck her outside observation and buried themselves in her flesh. Now they emerged and quested about her consciousness. And so in this last paragraph, we see the tree symbol come back. And remember, the tree symbolizes Janie's life. But in this paragraph, we find out that it's a very specific kind of tree. It's a pear tree. And pear tree has these like big, beautiful white flowers. And so let's continue from there and see how the symbol further develops. Janie was stretched on her back beneath the pear tree, soaking in the alto chant of the visiting bees, the gold of the sun and the panting breath of the breeze, when the inaudible voice of it all came to her. She saw a dust-bearing bee sink into the sanctum of a bloom, the thousand sister calyxes arched to meet the love embrace, and the ecstatic shiver of the tree from root to tiniest branch creaming in every blossom and frothing with delight. So this was marriage. She had been summoned to behold a revelation. Then Janie felt a pain, remorseless sweet, that left her limp and languid. So let's pause here and talk about the pear tree symbol. So you might have detected that when Janie looks at the bee and the flower, she experiences a type of sexual awakening where she discovers her desire for love and marriage, where she sees that the bee pollinates the flower and then from that can make honey. And so it's this symbiotic relationship where the flower and the bee need one another to survive. And when she sees that, it makes her realize that she wants that in her life. And it's a very idealized, romanticized version of romance romance and love and marriage. And so this is what Janie has been awakened to. So let's continue reading. After a while, she got up from where she was and went over the little garden field entire. She was seeking confirmation of the voice and vision, and everywhere she found and acknowledged answers. A personal answer for all other creations except herself. She felt an answer seeking her, but where, when, how? She found herself at the kitchen door and stumbled inside. In the air of the room were flies, tumbling and singing, marrying and giving in marriage. When she reached the narrow hallway, she was reminded that her grandmother was home with a sick headache. She was lying across the bed asleep, so Janie tipped out of the front door. Oh, to be a pear tree, any tree in bloom, with kissing bees singing of the beginning of the world. She was 16, she had glossy leaves and bursting buds, and she wanted to struggle with life, but it seemed to elude her. Where were the singing bees for her? Nothing on the place nor in her grandma's house answered her. She searched as much of the world as she could from the top of the front steps, and then went on down to the front gate and leaned over to gaze up and down the road, looking, waiting, breathing, short with impatience, waiting for the world to be made. Through pollinated air, she saw a glorious being coming up the road. In her former blindness, she had known him as the shiftless Johnny Taylor, tall and lean. That was before the golden dust of pollen had beglamored his rags and her eyes. So let's pause there and talk about the pear tree symbol a little more. So we have the pear tree, and we know that the tree symbolizes Janie's life. And so the flowers and the bee are just one part of her life. So if you think about a whole tree, the tree is the trunk and the branches and the leaves and the flowers. And Janie's discovered a new part of this tree, this sexual awakening, the discovery for desire, for love and marriage. And it's excited her, where all of a sudden she wants to explore the world and see what it has to offer her. She wants to go out and find love. And the thing is, this is brand new to Janie, and she's never experienced this. And so her first instinct is just to look around the house, to look outside the house. And she's like, well, where do I even begin? And she looks down the road, and that's when she sees Johnny Taylor, right after having kind of this awakening. So let's see what happens next. In the last stages of Nanny's sleep, she dreamed of voices. Voices far off but persistent, and gradually coming nearer. Janie's voice. Janie talking in whispery snatches with a male voice she couldn't quite place. That brought her wide awake. She bolted upright and peered out the window and saw Johnny Taylor lacerating her Janie with a kiss. Janie! The old woman's voice was so lacking in command and reproof, so full of crumbling dissolution, that Janie half believed that Nanny had not seen her. So she extended herself outside of her dream and went inside the house. That was the end of her childhood. Nanny's head and face looked like the standing roots of some old tree that had been torn away by storm. Foundation of ancient power that no longer mattered. The cooling Palma Christi leaves that Janie had bound about her grandma's head with a white rag had wilted down, become part and parcel of the woman. Her eyes didn't bore and pierce, they diffused and melted Janie, the room and the world into one comprehension. Janie, you's a woman now, so... Nah, Nanny, no, I ain't no real woman yet. The thought was too new and heavy for Janie. She fought it away. Nanny closed her eyes and nodded a slow, weary affirmation. Many times before she gave it voice. Yeah, Janie, you's got your womanhood on you. So I might as well tell you about what I've been saving up for a spell. I wants to see you married right away. So in this, on this page, we see that Nanny is compared to an old tree. So we see that kind of in the middle of the page where the tree symbolism continues. So Granny is an old tree because she is grown and she is dying, and therefore the tree is dying. And then we have Janie, who's a new tree because she's still growing and learning, and she's, according to Nanny, just reached her womanhood. And so we see that tree symbolism continue to develop, and you will continue to see the tree symbolism develop throughout the entire novel, so keep an eye out for it. Now I'm going to pause here because I'm almost out of time on this video, so pick up on video 2 to finish chapter 2.